Hey, thanks for joining Wealth Protector TV. Got a really great interview with two experts, Harry Barth, the founder of Barth Calderon, talking about asset protection for your home, and Pete Tentler, who is a reverse mortgage expert, is going to explain what that's all about, how to deal with it, how it's an asset protection tool. So thanks for being here again. Let's go take a listen. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wealth Protector TV. My name is Paul Hitchcock, and this is our channel at the law firm Barth Calderon to bring you high-level education. Really excited for our two guests today. Founder of Barth Calderon and senior managing partner Harry Barth is here with us. He will be talking about asset protection components related to your residence, your home. Very big issue. We also have Pete Tentler here, who's our certified reverse mortgage specialist. Pete, Harry, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be here, Paul.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for showing up. We know everybody's busy. So Harry, we're going to start off with you. Give us a little background about what we're talking about here, and we're going to jump right into this.
Sure. So as most of you know, our firm has expertise in asset protection planning. Today we're going to drill down a little bit and talk about probably one of the assets that are at the heart of asset protection planning, and that is the family home. So many times, people have had, whether it be automobile accidents, business-related liabilities, landlord-tenant-related liabilities, or liability to themselves, and the question immediately comes to the firm or to us is my home protected? So a few things I think that are important before we even begin. And that is that when we talk about asset protection, that one, we don't engage in that protection after the event. So we don't want to crash the car on Tuesday, call Harry and Pete on Wednesday and say, what can you do for me? Although there are things that we could do to help, asset protection is not very, very protective when it's done after the fact. The second thing that's very important to know is that for those of us that have living revocable trusts, the kinds of trusts that we do for estate planning purposes, for avoiding probate and laying down a great agenda for the family, those trusts, believe it or not, provide no asset protection whatsoever, because we typically get the question, well, my home is safe because it's in my trust. Trust is a big word. There are many kinds of trust that we would talk about, but a living revocable trust is not one of them that provides asset protection. And the last but not least is I have insurance for that. I bought insurance from State Farm, from Allstate and others, and we have to recognize that we can get judgments in excess of insurance, and there are an awful lot of things that insurance doesn't cover. So I guess a great way to begin is that in January of this year, 2021, for those people that are living in California. Now, remember, this is different from any other state. If any people are listening to this broadcast of Pete and mine in a state other than California, please contact us and we'll give you the homestead exemption for your state. Effective January 1st, 2021, California had a major cataclysmic impact on homestead exemptions. That's the amount of equity that we can keep in our home without it being subject to the claims of a creditor. So in California, in January 1, for two or more people or married couple occupying a property, we basically now have a minimum of $300,000 of equity that is protected up to a maximum of $600,000. And instead of basing it now upon marital status and age, as we had in the past, it used to be $75,000 for a single and $100,000 for a married couple and $175,000 for an older couple or disabled person. Now California basically says the amount of exemption is equal to the median price of a home in the county. So for example, in San Diego, Orange County, LA County, the homestead exemption, Paul, is now $600,000.
Huge jump.
Yeah, it jumped up significantly. And for example, in Riverside and San Bernardino, it's about $480,000, $490,000. So it's depending on where the home is located for the amount of the homestead exemption. And that's one of the first places we take a look. So one of the things we'll talk about, the use of postmarital agreements. We'll talk residential shield trusts, but what I want Pete to jump in on is very, very important. So let's distill this down to the minimum. is if we have less than $600,000 of equity in our home, after the cost of selling it, our home is considered an exempt asset. I don't care if there's $50 million judgment against you, you can't touch the home if there's, depending on the county you live on, less than $600,000 of equity. So many of us may wind up have a home $1.5 million, $2 million. We have $500,000 left on the mortgage, so that's 500,000. We have $600,000 of homestead exemptions, $1.1 million. So that leaves us now with a $2 million house with $900,000 of exposed equity. So what I'd like Pete to talk about a little bit is that, what could we do with that $900,000 of exposed equity? Is there any way that we can bring that down and provide asset protection for the home? What do you say, Pete?
Yeah, the reverse mortgage actually plays a key strategy, an asset protection strategy. This was brought to my attention by Harry several years ago. But before I talk about how the reverse mortgage, how it is, how it works, I'd really like to talk briefly about what it is not, because there's the problem with advisors these days, as knowledgeable as they are, standing on the reverse mortgage. And I'll just briefly sum it up. One gentleman told me, he said he thinks the reverse mortgage is a scam and a ripoff because you have to sign your house over to the bank. The bank pays you a mortgage payment, and when you die, the bank keeps the home and all the remaining equity. None of that's true. The true matter of reverse mortgages, you always retain title to the property, always. You can sell the home whenever you like and you keep all the remaining equity. You also have the option of taking monthly payments or not. You can take a lump sum or you can leave it all on the credit line just as a in case standby line of credit. Key in asset protection planning, because the reverse mortgage has no mortgage payments required, the mortgage balance, instead of going down little by little, will be going up little by little. So we don't know what the end dollar amount's going to be, because we don't know if you're going to borrow or how much you're going to borrow. More importantly, we don't know how long you're going to live. So what the lien is going to be for 1.5 times or 150% of the appraised value. And then there's a second lien with HUD. So here's a very simple analogy. You have a client that's in their, over 68 years of age, and they have a home worth $600,000, and they're eligible for a credit line of, say, $350,000 or $400,000. Okay. Now, the lien that we have on the home on a forward mortgage would be that $300,000 loan amount. But on a reverse, again, we don't know where that balance is going to be in the future. It's going to be $900,000 on the first with the lender. And then there's a second position for $900,000 with HUD. And they do two liens because HUD, it's an FHA insured loan. So it insures the lender and the borrowers that the home will never exceed a certain amount on the value. Once it does, the lender is paid off, and then HUD moves into first position seamlessly. So you have an example where you have a client that has this $300,000 credit line, or whatever the credit line is going to be, and he only has a $100 balance on it. What's going to show up on the title report are two liens for $900,000 each.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good time where Harry would chime in on
Sure.
how that would be beneficial.
Well, absolutely beneficial, because at that point, depending upon how much the reverse is for and how much the lien is for, if we have, you take the fair market value of the property, take the reverse, and then take the homestead exemption, in many cases, the home becomes an exempt asset from the claims of creditors. And I think that's absolutely remarkable and protects the family house, also protects the family home. Of course,
Hey,
there are a lot.
I was going to ask you a quick question. When someone's
Sure.
attacking a creditor, do they just go automatically look at the house,
yeah.
and look it up, and it is something they go after?
Oh, absolutely. The house is probably one of the first places they go, because it makes you the most uncomfortable, and therefore perhaps makes you settle for or pay much more than you would have paid because you don't want to lose your home. So
Right.
they'll look up in Zillow or places like that to find the fair market value. Then they'll look up public records to see how much is liened against the property, because most of the time that's recorded. And then they'll calculate in the new homestead exemption, decide whether or not that house is an exempt or a non-exempt asset. It's really nice to know that your house is an exempt asset.
Right.
But it goes further than that. So there's a couple of other things that could be done. Remember, all of us, that California is a community property state, you know, and so therefore, not only do we have community assets, we have community liabilities. So if Harry, crashes the car and kills two people, the lawsuit comes to Harry and to my wife as my community partner to the full extent of our community assets. So if my home is a community asset, then that asset will be subject to the claims minus the reverse mortgages, minus the homestead exemptions for the creditor. So one of the things that, there are numerous considerations, especially in light of what may be going on with the Biden administration and changes in taxation. Maybe we should consider changing our house from community property to 50-50 married, sole, and separate property if we're married. So I own half, my wife owns half. And maybe we should opt out of the community property system, saying that my liabilities are mine and my wife's liabilities are hers. So on top of the homestead exemption, on top of the equity which is being, leaned by the work that Pete and his people are doing, only my half of the house is subject to the claim and my wife's half of the house is not. It also puts a significant damper on the creditor, because the creditor can't sell the property because they're not going to be able to boot my wife out of the house because she has no liability and she didn't crash the car.
Is that a very complex thing to do, Harry, that postmarital agreement?
I don't think it's very complex to do. It could be complex, but it also could be highly simplified depending upon the assets that are involved, the nature of the people that are involved. But overall, it's not a very, very difficult or very complicated legal process. But Pete, you've been talking a little bit about people who are over age 62. Not everybody's over 62. So we can have a couple who's in their 50s and they have a property that's worth $2 million. Let's just use that for example. And let's just even say that they don't have currently any mortgage on it at all. And let's say we have a $600,000 homestead exemption. So I got $1,400,000 of exposure. Now let's say that I turned around and divided the property 50-50 between spouses, which really put a lot of protection around that property along the way. So, but still, if I have a liability to both of them, even though it's 50-50, I'm going to look at the house. So Pete, isn't there a way, something we can actually put a mortgage on that property or a home equity line of credit?
Yeah, given that scenario, you have a $1.4 million gap or delta. That would be 70% loan to value. In that case, you would probably just get and you wanted a full 100% encumbrance, you would get a first mortgage for 1.4 million. Traditional mortgage, it wouldn't be a HELOC. Usually HELOCs don't go that high on the credit line. I've seen them as high as 250,000, but I guess in certain cases they can make an exception. But either way, whether it's a traditional forward mortgage or a home equity line of credit, HELOC, it would encumber that property to the 1.4 million.
Right. And I think it's important to understand that there are two different levels of asset protection planning that we're concerned about here. One is, when a creditor looks in, they will then see if Pete and his people helped establish a new first mortgage or even a reverse mortgage, they will see, even if it's a reverse line of credit, they will see the encumbrances on the property. The creditor also has no way of knowing whether or not those lines of credit have been exercised and the money pulled out of the property. They have no way of knowing, but they could do the math real quick. They could look at, amount of the mortgage, amount of the exemption, cost of sale, and see what value that property is as far as their attack is concerned. So that's a very important component. But the other important component to understand is that it is possible that the homeowner will exercise that line of credit or that reverse line of credit. And then, of course, the second component comes about is we need to make sure that the money that they've taken out of the property is appropriately and properly protected from the claims of third-party creditors as well. So you have two things. You got protecting the real estate and protecting the equity that comes out of the real estate. And one of the other things that we'd like to talk about is that it's really important to consider all the options when it comes to a home. So throughout the country, and depending upon the size of an estate, the use of a qualified personal residence trust is very, very important to understand as a tool that we use to help protect the home from federal estate taxes, which could be going up significantly. It has been impacted by California Proposition 19, but it's beyond the scope of what we have to talk about here today. And I think it's also very important to understand that there are certain types of trusts. We like to call them our residential shield trusts, where we are able to place a home into a special living revocable trust called a title holding trust, and able to remove or transfer and or assign the beneficiary's interest to an LLC to provide some asset protection for the home. But what you're looking at is a coordinated effort. One of the things that I've liked over the years when we are being engaged to protect the home is not only the legal tools and techniques, but as Pete likes to call himself, the financial locksmith, to unlock that equity. I can't move the home, but I sure as heck can move the equity and allow the client to really be able to sleep better at night, at least knowing that their home is not going to be an asset that's subject to creditor claims.
And Harry, what comes up a lot, I hear you brought up, is people say, well, I've got it in my living trust, my house, and so I'm fine, we're safe.
Yeah, and I think we've dispelled that right at the beginning, that a living revocable trust provides no asset protection whatsoever. Real protection will be the stuff that Pete does and the stuff that I do. The legal process and the stripping of the equity from the home through an appropriate and proper methodology can provide true protection for probably one of our most valuable assets. Because remember, Paul and Pete, well, Pete knows this, that it's not just the house, it's a home. It's where the children grew up. It's where they played in the street. It's where the memories are. So many people, my God, I hate to be morose, this is where they want to die. A house that's a rental property, we don't have the same attachment. It's our home. And so therefore we want to do everything that we possibly can do. And it's not just economics. Sometimes it's emotion. So keep that property in the family and have it perhaps move to the children. And Pete, talking about that, how can we, if we have a reverse mortgage, to dispel a rumor, my wife and I, we die. All right, we're done. We're not in the house anymore. So I know at that point, the reverse has to be paid off. Did my children necessarily lose the house? Can they refinance it, pay off the first? Tell me what happens if my children want to stay in the property. How would we go about doing that if there's a reverse mortgage on the house?
Well, there's no loan payments required on a reverse mortgage. We all know that. The loan payment, the loan needs to be repaid when you permanently move out of the home, whether you go into permanent assisted living or sell the home or die. Okay, so in this case, you die. You and Tess die, and the loan becomes due. Your heirs are responsible for repaying the loan. They have the option of paying all cash. Maybe they have money in the bank and they just want to pay it off, pay the reverse mortgage off, or maybe they need to get a mortgage from the bank to pay that off, or they sell it. So they have three options, but the lender needs to know within a month what their intentions are and how they're planning on repaying it. And the lender's going to cooperate with them because they don't want any bad press, but they have the option of keeping the home, but they do need to pay off the lender.
Is there ever been a situation where a reverse mortgage, I don't know the answer to this question, and it may never have happened. Is there ever a situation where a reverse mortgage with appropriate and proper credit facility be converted to a first mortgage on a property for the next generation?
Well, yeah, so you would get your heirs would get a mortgage from the bank, and they would refinance the loan, because that's what they're doing. They're refinancing, they're paying off the existing reverse, and now they're taking a forward mortgage, which they're going to be making mortgage payments on. So yes.
My question though is, are there reverse mortgage lenders that do both? In other words,
Yes.
so we
Yes.
have a reverse mortgage lender has the reverse mortgage, and now we're becoming a first forward mortgage for the next generation. So internally, they may be able to pay off and establish a new one right with the same lender. Is that possible?
Yeah, and it's about as seamless as you can get when
Wow.
when you do it that way.
That's exciting. That's a new one that I didn't think of, that I think is really important.
Yeah.
So I think I think that what we've done here is we got a really good idea. We've dispelled the myths about reverse mortgages. We've dispelled the myths about living revocable trust. We've talked about a house and a home and how important it is for it to be protected. We've talked about methodologies through the use of appropriate postnuptial agreements, through the use of specialized and proper trust, through the use of homestead exemptions, and through the use of various different equity releasing processes. And I think that we would really be thrilled to help everybody analyze what's the best course for their home. I know that Pete will take a look with me and see what we can do to make sure that they're as protected as they can be. And that's pretty much what I have to say today. Pete, anything further from you?
I just think that, the professional advisors that are watching this today, it's oftentimes I run into them and they say, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know the answer or how the reverse mortgage works. And please don't do that. Call me. My tagline on my email is any questions, anytime. I promise I will make you feel comfortable by calling me about anything, whether you're looking to get a reverse mortgage for your client, your family members. Maybe you had a client or a family member that just recently died and they had a reverse mortgage, and you need to know what are the next steps to repay it. I don't charge a fee for doing that. It's all free. I'm happy to be your free consultant. But any questions, anytime.
But at least we have to buy you lunch because there's no free lunch. Okay, great. So Paul, it's all yours.
Yeah, no, thanks, Harry. Great information always. Pete, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll look forward to having you back here on Wealth Protector TV soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.